committee resumes and we continue with representatives from Macro Group and International and Foreign Investment Group. Welcome back. And I go to Senator O'Neill.
Thank you very much, Chair. I want to follow up on some developments yesterday where we saw concerning reports about Mr Dutton's transactions on the stock market during the global financial crisis. In an article published by Samantha Maiden, which I'm tabling now, on news.com, which was entitled Peter Dutton's Highly Unusual GFC Share Trading in Labor's Sites, it was revealed that the day before the Rudd government announced a $4 billion stimulus package to be delivered in partnership with the Australian banks, Mr Dutton declared that he'd purchased a quantity of shares. Those shares were in the National Australia Bank, the Commonwealth Bank and Westpac shares. And this at a time when everyone in the community is freaking out about the GFC. This is what Mr Dutton was doing. Now, for the benefit of committees and officials, I have a copy of an update to Mr Dutton's Register of Members' Interests dated the 23rd of January 2009, and I would like to table that. I've got some documents there for you, Chair. And I'll provide this to the Secretariat. And if you have a look, dated the 23rd, that is one day before the Rudd government's announcement of a $4 billion stimulus package, dated the 24th of January. And that statement, under the banner of the Prime Minister of Australia, is a second document that I would also seek to table. Now, given this package was a value of $4 billion in the course of a global financial crisis, I want to check, would such a statement of $4 billion in a global financial crisis have an impact on the share market?
But that didn't work. It didn't have the opposite effect.
Shane Johnson, Acting Deputy Secretary, Macroeconomic Group. It would depend on the nature of the package and where it was directed to. So it would depend on a number of factors on whether or not that it would have an impact on the share market.
Sorry, Mr Johnson, I'm having a little difficulty
so I would just say
hearing.
it would. It would depend on the nature of the package and where it was directed to on whether or not it would have an impact on the share market.
Okay, so this particular...
Senator O'Neill, the committee tables the documents circulated.
So the stimulus package with a value of $4 billion is not a small amount. Clearly, if you look at the Prime Minister's statement, you'd expect that it would have some impact on the share market, because that, in fact, was part of its design. Is that correct, Mr Johnson?
Can I just raise a point of order, please?
Senator McGrath.
Thank you. Chair, would ask you to rule on how this does meet the test of relevance, because how do these questions go to the operations or financial positions of departments and agencies which are seeking funding estimates? So I would like you to rule, please, in relation to these questions concerning muckraking from Labor, but concerning the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Senator McGrath. So the questions which are relevant to Senate estimates are questions going to the operation or financial positions of the department and agencies. And so the test of relevance relates to matters going to, the operations of departments who are with us. And obviously, Senate estimates is an important vehicle for transparency in the Parliament. You've asked me to rule on Senator O'Neill's questions, which I have not seen or heard yet. So I'll give Senator O'Neill the call, and Senator O'Neill can ask her questions. If your point of order is the same as Senator McGrath's, Senator Smith.
My point of order, to satisfy yourself that Senator O'Neill's line of questioning is or is not out of order, I propose we have a private meeting so that Senator O'Neill can...
I haven't even asked a question.
I think,
and you're already running.
I would make the point that Senator
Cover
O'Neill
for
is
your leader.
trying to conflate two unrelated issues.
Well, I don't think
One
we know
issue
what...
is contents on the Register of Interest for a House of Representatives member, and completely unrelated is government attitudes, impact on stock markets of government decisions. So you've got a course of action, Chair. I strongly suggest we might have a private meeting. You can satisfy yourself. I think this is novel. It is creative. I don't deny Senator O'Neill that attribute.
I think Senator Smith, my answer is the same to Senator McGrath. We're sort of preempting a line. I haven't heard it yet. So Senator Smith, you have the call. Senator Smith.
Senator O'Neill.
Senator O'Neill.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So we're discussing the GFC. Roll back the clock. We're back in 2008, 2009. The government is contending with a massive shock to the economy right across the globe. A stimulus package worth $4 billion during that global financial crisis would definitely have an impact. My question is, would it have an impact on the share market?
Like I said, I think it would...
Senator McGrath, Senator O'Neill has asked a question. We'll just have an answer. The point of orders have been the same. Your two point of orders have been the same. So
the point of order is don't let
Senator O'Neill has a...
I think. Okay, so
Senator O'Neill has a question. Dr. Johnson is about to answer it.
I have a point of order, Chair.
I very much hope it's different from your previous point of order, Senator McGrath.
This goes to actually a hypothetical situation, and the Minister...
the GFC
indeed,
wasn't hypothetical, Mr.
Please don't interrupt me when I'm speaking.
Please let me ask the questions. You're creating a defensive line here. You won't even let me ask a single question. Have you got that much to hide that you don't want me to interrogate?
Am I allowed to speak without being interrupted?
What is the point of order, Senator McGrath?
Relevance?
My point of order goes to the relevance of the question that's been asked by Senator O'Neill, because it relates to a hypothetical situation.
I've already ruled, Senator McGrath, in fairness to you, I have already ruled on relevance and said that I will allow the questions. And so you've raised the same point of order. We've had 3 goes at point of order. Senator O'Neill's asked a question. Dr. Johnson was about to answer the question.
Thank you.
No, Dr. Johnson.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson.
I'm trying to raise...
Thank you, Dr. Johnson.
Chair, I was halfway through my point of order.
Senator McGrath.
When you interrupted.
orders in these hearings?
Deputy Chair, is the point of order different? You've said that the point of order is about relevance. Again, I've said that we're going to hear the questions from Senator O'Neill. What is the difference in your point of order?
Am I allowed to finish my point of order without being interrupted by either you, Chair, or by Senator O'Neill? Can we at least agree to that, please?
Get to it.
So I'm allowed to. My point of order goes to the question that has been put by Senator O'Neill. Senator O'Neill is asking for an opinion from the officials at the table in relation to what may or may not have happened concerning the government expenditure that happened over 16 years ago. My maths is 16 years ago. It is a hypothetical, but also I don't see how the officials at the table could have knowledge of the events that have been asked about. And so if Chair, that there's a hypothetical question, previously in this committee, you have ruled out questions that have been put that are hypotheticals. The Minister has refused to answer questions that are hypotheticals. So I'm asking again for your ruling that in this situation we're dealing with a hypothetical question, and if that is, please don't interrupt me. If that is
thank
the
you,
case,
Senator McGrath. There is no rule against hypothetical questions in estimates. Your point of order is essentially again about the test of relevance. I've ruled on that point of order already and said it's difficult to judge that when we have barely heard Senator O'Neill's questions. So, Senator O'Neill, you have the call.
Thank you. Well, the first document that I've provided, the attachment with the register of Mr Dutton's members' interest statement, is hardly hypothetical. It's a document of fact. It's available. He bought shares on the National Australia Bank, Commonwealth Bank and Westpac shares. At the same time, a stimulus package, as a matter of fact, was provided of $4 billion in the global financial crisis. I do wish the GFC was a hypothetical, but it was a reality that the Australian government had to deal with.
I'm going to allow Senator O'Neill to ask her question.
Given this package was being delivered in partnership with the Australia's major banks,
to allow Senator O'Neill to ask her question.
You would expect this package would have an impact on the prices for shares in interjecting,
Senator McGrath.
Now, the fact is...
Senator McGrath, stop interjecting.
Chair, I have a point of order.
Please.
Chair, I have a point of order.
You've got a problem. I don't know if it's a point of order. That is completely inappropriate behaviour, Senator McGrath. Completely inappropriate. I've never seen defence like this. There's got to be something pretty bad here if you're running this line of defence. Why don't you just let me ask my questions?
Can we hear the question?
Chair, I have a point of order.
Can we hear it? I think you have a hypothetical point of order, Senator McGrath, because we haven't even heard the questions being asked. We haven't even heard the questions being asked.
Three things.
They are very concerned, Minister. They just don't want to even hear the question, let alone the answer.
Just hear the point of order.
Senator McGrath, all I am attempting to do is to allow Senator O'Neill to ask some questions. You've got a point of order on relevance, which you've put in a different way a few times, and I've responded and ruled on that already and said we need to hear the questions. I'm not sure why you are so concerned about these questions being put. Is it a different point of order, Senator McGrath?
Chair, I have a point of order, and with respect to what we just witnessed then, it should not take a senator 20 or 30 times when they wish to raise a point of order.
You have already had your point of order ruled on.
Senator McGrath. You're not the chair.
Well, it's already been ruled on, though. I mean, that's the reality of it. We should be getting on with the questions.
This is a shambles. You're not the chair.
You're running cover.
Well, what is the
point of order?
You are running cover for your leader.
What is the point of order?
He's got a point of order. He wants to raise his point of order.
What is the point of order?
The chair is required to hear his point of order.
It's your time. You're eating into just
Sorry,
with this nonsense. I want to ask the questions.
Well, I'm very happy.
I've made that pretty clear.
Point of order. You can't just make your own rules.
So would you like the call now, Senator Bragg? So you would or would not like the call, Senator Bragg?
I'm trying to raise a point of order. As a senator, I am entitled to ask or call for a point of order. With respect, Chair, it should not take me 20 or 30 times for you to give the call to me in relation to a point of order. I think that was actually discourteous because all senators have the right to ask for a point of order. But I think we should try.
I'll respond to what you've said is discourteous there, Senator Murray, because I think I'm able to do that. The Parliament and the committee can't operate if senators repeatedly take the same point of order over and over and over again. So I'm hoping that you will have a different point of order this time. I've ruled on relevance and I've said that it is appropriate for Senator O'Neill to ask her questions. So do you have a different point of order?
With respect, Chair, to that ruling you just made then, you don't know what point of order I was actually going to raise.
Okay.
So I don't think that you should
what is your point of
assign or assume
what is the point of order?
Particular senators.
It's been like
what is the point of order?
4 minutes. We still haven't had the point of order. 4 minutes.
point
I
of
want to
order,
talk about $4 billion investment in the Australian economy. You want to waste 4
the
minutes?
point of order goes to the question that Senator O'Neill first put, which the table started to answer, and then I raised that point of order, and then you ruled on that, Chair. You then gave the call back to Senator O'Neill, which is your right as Chair to assist for the smooth running of this committee. But then Senator O'Neill then proceeded to talk about the register of interest of the Leader of the Opposition. The register of interest of the Leader of the Opposition are in no way relevant to the proceedings underway here at the moment. And I would ask you to rule that the register of interests of Peter Dutton are not relevant to the proceedings of this committee today, where we are here to inquire and examine into funds that are expended by the relevant departments. Now, I would ask you to rule on that particular element, please, Chair.
I have ruled on relevance already that I would like to hear Senator O'Neill's questions, and I believe that Senator O'Neill is going to matters of transparency, matters of accountability, matters of operations of departments, and Senator O'Neill has the call.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. And I seek your protection to actually
Senator
ask
O'Neill
these
has
questions.
the call.
Chair, if I may.
Senator O'Neill has the call.
Thank you, Chair.
I'm a substantive member of this committee.
But I haven't given you the call, Senator
No,
Smith,
but I've
and
asked
Senator
you
O'Neill
what
has the call.
You actually don't have discretion on whether
Oh, my
to give
goodness.
someone a call when they've asked a point of order.
I didn't hear you raise a point
I
of
said
order.
point of order.
Is your point of order different?
The matter that Senator O'Neill seeks to
This is going to be a
prosecute by
marathon
her
of points of
own
order. I can see
admission,
10 minutes
by
in
her
now.
own admission,
Keep digging, boys.
is at the wrong committee. Senator O'Neill proceeded to quote from a letter that she has tabled. That letter
Plenty
makes
more
it
to
very,
table.
very clear.
Let's
That
see.
letter
We'll
makes
all
it
fit
very,
in.
very clear.
Stay tuned. I've got a path for you to follow.
No need to shout.
The letter that Senator O'Neill has quoted from makes it very, very clear that that letter is directed to the Clerk of the House of Representatives and the Registrar of Members' Interests. First point. The second point, so if Senator O'Neill would like to prosecute this matter, it should be done elsewhere.
Document.
My second point is, and Senator O'Neill failed to quote this, is that it makes it very, very clear that Mr Dutton
This is not
was providing
point of order.
full
This is
disclosure
argument. You'll get your
to the
turn.
Clerk of the House of
This is
Representatives
argument.
as the Shadow Minister for Health and Ageing. The Shadow Minister for Health and Ageing. So in both accounts, Senator O'Neill is seeking to prosecute this matter at the wrong place.
That's not
You are either
correct.
prosecuting a matter in regards to the GFC
Statement
full
of-
stop,
his
or you are
statement
prosecuting a
of,
matter in regards to the Leader of the Opposition
interests relates
at
to his
the wrong
behaviour regardless
forum.
of what portfolio.
So,
I'll
Chair,
let Senator O'Neill respond in general terms about the matters that she is
It's
raising,
clear in the document.
which are with
It's clear
Senator
in the
O'Neill.
document.
Seeking advice from the clerk on this matter.
No,
They want the clerk.
This would be as relevant as Senator O'Neill giving a speech in the House of
I've invited
Representatives.
Senator O'Neill to respond
Thank you.
to
I'd
the
like
point
to
of order.
actually speak to...
On this matter? I think that would be a very reasonable request.
I've asked Senator O'Neill
I know,
to
but I'm asking you to seek advice from
respond
the clerk.
to the point of order. Senator O'Neill.
The facts are there was a GFC. There was concern about the economy and about the banks, and a stimulus package was designed to the value of $4 billion, and it was integrated with the banks. Now, it was being a partnership to be delivered with the major banks. Is it clear from such a general practice in advancing a policy of that kind that there would be an impact on the prices in the share market of the major banks from a federal investment by the government of $4 billion? Mr Johnson.
It's not right to assume that every member of Parliament...
You're not Mr
Dr Johnson is actually prepared to answer a question, which is great. Dr Johnson.
I didn't work on those policies at the time, so I'm not sure exactly on their makeup. A number of things will influence share prices. I think in terms of these ones, if you're interested in the particular measures, it's probably best referring them to my colleagues in Markets Group. I think they're the ones that you seem to be interested in.
Thank you. Can I go to the fact that's a matter of historical record and seek your response to this? The fact is that the Commonwealth Bank shares rose from $23.94 at the close of trading on the 23rd of January, the same date as Mr Dutton's Register of Members' Interests, to a high of $29.11 on the 3rd of February 2009. Such was the impact of the $4 billion statement. That was a significant rise in the share price. Now, your Treasury, I'm just going on my maths, which is a rise of 21.6% in a period of 12 days. So clearly, if we just look at the line of facts, GFC hits, government comes up with a package, interacts with the banks in the planning, serious planning goes on, $4 billion is invested, 23rd of January at their lowest price, Mr Dutton purchases Commonwealth Bank shares and then moves to hold those shares for 12 days according to his Register of Interests, and in that period there is a significant rise of 21.6%. So clearly, based on Mr Dutton's records, there has been a clear policy impact to boost the availability of finance in the midst of the GFC and an impact on the shares. Now, in the way in which these things are done, can I come to your knowledge as a Treasury official? To your knowledge,
Order. Senator O'Neill.
Your Register of Interest is
to your knowledge, were any parliamentarians, or would it generally be the practice, if that is the way you need to respond, would parliamentarians be briefed ahead of the announcements?
Like I said, I wasn't involved in that policy, so I'm not sure who was briefed ahead of it, so I can't answer. I didn't work on that policy.
So, Mr Cagliarini, is that how I pronounce your name correctly? Yeah. Would you be able to give me a response to the process that would be involved with such a significant policy announcement? It's from the Prime Minister. If you were going to be implementing this at this point of time, what would the process be in terms of briefing parliamentarians?
What do you mean by briefing parliamentarians? So there'd be, a normal process would be that there'd be proposals would be taken to Cabinet for Cabinet consideration. Yes. Cabinet would consider those measures. They would then decide on whether or not they want to go ahead with that proposal. Often there will be, in that type of environment, they would then work out some form of announcement and handling strategy. So that would be a normal process, I would think. So just normal Cabinet process. And like I said, I was not involved in that process. So I'm not sure if that was taken, but that would be a pretty standard process. So there's generally an iterative process, and there's involvement of a range of parliamentarians at different points. So could you take on notice, were any parliamentarians briefed ahead of the announcement? And also, to your knowledge, and if you need to take this on notice, were any representatives of the opposition briefed ahead of this announcement?
Highly unlikely that a shadow spokesman in a health...
Well, you can pontificate.
...would be briefed if a briefing was to happen on a Treasury matter. That is pretty
stay tuned.
Common occurrence.
There's a Treasury official over there.
You are clutching at straws.
We'll see. Senator O'Neill.
Long ones, I've got to say.
Senator O'Neill has the call.
To your knowledge, were there any representatives of the opposition briefed ahead of this announcement? And if you need to, you can take that particular question with regard to this matter on notice. But generally, could you speak to major policy announcements and practices of briefing members of the opposition?
Outside of their portfolio responsibilities.
So I'd have to take that on notice. I'm not sure. Like I said, I didn't work on that policy. In terms of general practice, it's a matter for government.
And the government could choose to do so?
If it wanted to, I'm sure it can. Yep.
Okay, thank you very much. So if you could take on notice who was briefed about this announcement, when that occurred, and what information they were provided. And if you could also take a moment to give me some insights into any specific probity arrangements that might be made for market-sensitive information moving from Treasury amongst stakeholders, parliamentary members of both the government and the opposition. How do you deal with market-sensitive information?
Sorry, could I unfortunately missed the first bit of the question. I couldn't hear. Sorry.
It is rather difficult.
The Senator's question will be heard in silence. Senator O'Neill.
Thank you. So on notice, I've asked you to provide this committee with, were any parliamentarians briefed ahead of the announcement? The document summarising it I've called it attachment 2 under the heading Prime Minister of Australia. Building Australia's Future, $4 billion Australian business investment partnerships to support Australian jobs. I'm seeking who was briefed, parliamentarians in particular, and to your knowledge, were there any representatives of the oppositions briefed ahead of this announcement? What information they were provided and at what time? Now, on notice, specifically, in this instance, were any specific probity arrangements made for this particular market-sensitive information? I expect you want that on notice, but in general now, for the record, Dr Johnson, given the scale of a $4 billion announcement to support jobs through the Australian Business Investment Partnerships designed with the banks, what sort of specific probity arrangements would be generally applied in such circumstances?
When you're asking about probity arrangements, say in terms of departmental officials, or
yeah, well, market sensitivity. Clearly, you must have some rules for your own staff, but interacting with parliamentarians, what are your practices?
So for us, we would. Let me just gather some thought, because this doesn't often come up. A general practice would be that there would, so there's a range. So sometimes there might be a requirement to sign some form of non-disclosure, or some kind of non-disclosure. Individuals who are working on a certain package, or when they're being informed of it, you might be required to disclose particular conflicts of interest and address with those appropriately. So I think they're probably the two that I'd go to first, would be ensuring that conflicts of interest are disclosed and they're managed appropriately, and then secondly, if it would have significant market implications, that there'd be a non-disclosure and also requirements not to act on that information as well. And that would be what I would expect, yeah.
So there are public service standards around this that you would expect, and processes that would kick in. And if someone were to breach that, what would the reaction be from you, Dr. Johnson?
I mean, that would be something I would certainly raise with the Secretary, and would raise with the APSC.
Because it would be at odds completely with the APS codes.
Yep.
You have mentioned the signing of documents with regard to confidentiality around things that would be market sensitive. In other committees in the course of my work, we've seen people who abrogated that responsibility and shared confidential information. So it does happen from time to time with individuals of uncertain character. Now, can I go to the fact that this Australian Business Investment Partnership clearly was the responsibility of a Treasury official, and it is just a reminder of a matter of fact, and I proffer attachment 3, which I've marked up. Have you got a copy of that?
Yep. Attachment
3. That indicates the person responsible for this particular $4 billion project, that Australian Business Investment Partnership, was Mr. Godwin Gretsch. That is noted in the Senate Committee of Privileges report, the 142nd report, I believe, which I will have at hand. Thank you. So the Committee of Privileges, page 84, Mr. Gretsch was heavily involved in the development of the Australian Business Investment Partnership, ABIP, including attending meetings and negotiations with the major banks. What does that mean for Mr. Gretsch's professional responsibilities as a heavily involved person in the development of that program?
So I think those questions are probably better directed to our corporate area, and so they'll be coming up. I think they might be after this.
So I will re-prosecute that question there, but I want to put on the record that Treasury's submission to the Senate Committee of Privileges included emails from Mr Gretsch to senior Liberal Party figures, and this ran across the period of time from September 2008, roughly the collapse of the Lehman Brothers around that period of time, through to the period ending June 2009. Now, reading these documents embedded in this report, with submissions provided by Treasury and the Australian Federal Police, I seek to table two further documents. One is an email from Mr Gretsch to an unnamed individual, but it will become more clear where that went. And then I've got another one that I want to table as well. So perhaps we can put these in front of you. So if I can point you to this email from Mr Godwin Dretsch to the person who is not identified, just to confirm Mr Gretsch's perceptions of his role in the Australian Business Investment Partnership. He states in that email, I have been very busy. I very much hope you and your family are well. So obviously there's a familiarity. Then he goes on to say, I have been very busy here dealing with this bank guarantee business and Rudd's unintended consequences. There is much to discuss. Have you got the document?
No.
I have provided copies. Yeah.
But my recollection was Godwin was part of Markets Group, so it's probably better directing the questions to Markets Group. Like I said, I wasn't involved in the policy.
Okay. Look, in the interests of time, and I know that the Chair is seeking to move the call on, we'll just wait for these documents to come to you, and I'll, if I can come back and follow that up, that would be great. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Senator O'Neill. The Deputy Chair.
Thanks very much. Just to move back to this century. What role is Treasury playing in supporting negotiations with the US on tariff exemptions?
All that dirt. And yet you never get promoted, Deb. Why is that? They get you to do all the dirty work. And yet they never reward you. They never reward you. It must really be. They never reward you for doing all that dirty work.
Order.
Is that the question?
Hello.
It's about what Treasury's doing.
Do you want me to read the question?
Yeah, sorry, could you take the question again, please? Sorry.
Sure. What role is Treasury playing in supporting negotiations with the US on tariff exemptions?
So Treasury is supporting the Treasurer in its usual way in terms of tariffs. But if you want to talk about tariffs that supporting of tariffs, it's probably best directed towards, I think it's our fiscal group colleagues.
Fiscal group?
I think so, yeah.
So you can't answer any more questions on tariffs?
Oh, well, it depends what the questions are, but if you talked about tariff policy, so...
Well, there was a background note sent to media yesterday by Mr Chalmers' office. Do you know about that?
No, I don't, sorry.
It talks about that the US Treasury Secretary and Mr Chalmers had their first bilateral discussion. Do you know about this?
So, yeah, that's a matter for my colleague.
Yeah, Senator Chris Tinning, Acting Deputy Secretary of the International Foreign Investment Group. Yes, we're supporting the Treasurer's visit to Washington.
Okay, so the new US Secretary of Treasury has been there since 28 January. Has there been any other engagement between the Australian Treasurer and the US Treasury Secretary?
So Senator Steph Grecky-Nattick, Acting First Assistant Secretary. No, Senator. So they met in the margins of, I think it was the October IMF meetings last year. That was their first encounter, and then I think this is the next meeting since.
Has there been any? So there's been no other formal communication that you're aware of?
Sorry, Senator, the letter of congratulatory letter was sent out.
Letter of congratulations. And what about informal channels that you're aware of?
Well, there's been a lot of work done to ensure that this meeting occurred. So you can imagine that there has been communication with the administration and the Australian government and our representatives.
What was the nature of those communications?
Well, arranging to have a meeting, a formal face-to-face meeting.
Who was involved? Who was involved with that? Just wondering who's doing diplomacy for Australia these days.
What do you mean? Who's doing
I'm wondering who helped with this informal engagement. You said it was informal. I'm asking you about the nature of the informal engagement between the Treasurer of Australia.
Well, who would you
and
expect to do it?
I don't know, Greg Norman, someone, the cat, I don't know, it could be anyone. I'm wondering who it might be.
Well, we have an ambassador and we have an embassy, and that is the normal way that governments engage in country to set up arrangements. You would expect that to be the case, and it is.
But isn't the ambassador a formal channel, not an informal channel?
Well, that's your language. I'm not saying. I'm saying that there was engagement in order to establish and have this formal face-to-face meeting which has occurred, and I understand it might be the first meeting of its type of Treasurer to Commerce Secretary that's been held in country.
So has the Treasury modelled the impact of the proposed tariff on Australia's steel and aluminium industry?
So we've done a range of modelling around different potential tariff scenarios.
Yeah, what does it show?
The Secretary talked a little bit about some of, I think, at the last Senate estimates. I guess one of the challenges at the moment is it is quite uncertain and unpredictable about what might happen, so that kind of adds into what might happen globally. But we've been looking... So
you've done scenarios?
We've done, different types of scenarios, so yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Okay, so, but what about the macroeconomic impact on the overall economy? Have you done analysis on that?
So we've provided advice to the Treasurer to support Cabinet.
Yep.
However, just to kind of go through where things are at. So what we've kind of tried to look at, I think, like I said, I think the Secretary looked at this before, or talked about this before, but we kind of looked at a couple of illustrative scenarios. So one where countries impose tariffs on for example, on our trading partners, and then other ones where tariffs might be imposed directly onto Australia as part of a broader thing. So on the first one, you're kind of looking. So on the first one, where you're looking at on trading partners, we kind of look through three key channels. So we're looking at the impact on global growth that then flows through to the domestic economy. We look at potential implications around inflation, and then also the other channel, which we can't model as well. Well, we can, but it's a bit more challenging. Is elevated uncertainty just because of the environment as well.
Okay.
When we're looking at those ones, the extent of the impacts can't really do depend on a range of factors.
Yeah.
But we expect that the impact on the Australian economy is quite modest. When we're looking at quite modest, yeah. When we're looking at tariffs directly imposed on Australian exports, again, it really does depend on a range of factors. It will depend on the for example, the trade share of the tariffs. It will also depend on what happens globally. So, as the Secretary mentioned earlier this morning, so whether or not producers can identify an alternative market to sell to. It'll also depend on exchange rate impacts, which can go a variety of ways. But again, we expect the impacts on the Australian economy as a whole to be modest. What I would say, and I think the Secretary was going there as well before, that if tariff rates do become significantly high, or we start getting into an escalation of tariffs, then that could have that spiral could have a significant impact on global growth. That would have a significant impact on the Australian economy.
Have you done any modelling on jobs?
The model will the modelling normally will output jobs as well. Yes.
Do you know what it is?
No, not sorry, I don't have that.
Can you supply that on notice?
We can take that on notice. Yeah.
Thanks. Can I ask you about this superannuation summit in Washington? Is this your area?
Not my area, sorry.
Who's that market?
So revenue group do superannuation, so it could be. It depends on the nature of your question. So if you want to answer or do the question, we can hear, and then I can help you direct to the right place.
We can give them to. So
it could be
revenue. That's where they live. Okay.
Yeah. So if it's in relation to the summit itself, colleagues at International might. So you might want to ask the question just in case it's not revenue group.
I'll ask you about the summit. Did you provide advice to the Treasurer on the trade impact of super fund investment into the US as part of his remarks?
So, Senator, we did fact-checking of the speech, as is normal practice. I'm not aware that we provided particular advice on that matter.
You're not aware? So do you think that superannuation investment into the United States is a significant capital investment in the scale of the US capital markets?
So I think the US market is a significant market, and they're an important investment partner for Australia.
And what about the origins of this summit? What can you tell us about it? Whose idea was it?
So it was organised by our colleagues at Department of Foreign Affairs and Washington Post in particular. So the event itself, questions around that's probably best directed to them.
So the idea of having this summit was from Mr. Rudd?
It was from Washington Post and Dept. I'm not sure the particulars where the idea came from. As I said, Treasury was not involved in organising it.
Yeah, and what sort of resourcing did you provide for it?
So we supported the Treasurer for his trip over there, which was also to meet with his counterparts in addition to the summit. And we have a posted officer in Washington who assisted more in a supporting role, but Treasury wasn't involved in organising the summit itself. So we can try to answer questions as best we can, but it's colleagues at Dept who would be more aware of the efforts behind it to pull it together.
Did you work with industry stakeholders?
No, Senator.
Okay, so all you did was provide fact-checking for remarks?
And support for the Treasurer for the trip.
What sort of support?
The usual sort of thing that Treasury does for these things. It's a briefing pack to support the meetings that he's attending. And as I said, we did check the keynote speech that he's providing at the summit.
Okay, so it was really just around the speech. And there's no further insight into, you can give us into the origin of the summit, other than it came from Washington?
Well, that's great. I mean, these sorts of events is sort of what our DFAT colleagues kind of do on a fairly regular basis to promote investment opportunities between partner countries. But beyond that, Senator, no, not. It's really best placed to direct those questions to them.
Do you know which industry stakeholders attended from Australia?
No, Senator, don't have the attendance list. As I say, we weren't part of the organising, and so.
Okay, so when you prepared briefings for the Treasurer, you didn't tell him who was going from Australia?
We had some information more on the US participants, but as I say, the event's kind of just winding up now as well, so don't have that clear picture of who actually did attend. But it was all that sort of organising was done by our DFAT colleagues. The approaches to partners and organising attendance, etc., is all done by them.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask, just checking how I'm going with time here? Yep, keep going. Yep. Just on the care economy and productivity, the Treasurer has spoken broadly about the need to differentiate between private and public sector jobs, market and non-market jobs. Can you confirm that non-market versus market jobs is an ABS metric?
ABS metric? Yeah. Yes, we put the market versus non-market from the ABS labour account. Yep.
It is?
Yep.
Okay. Do you have a clear figure in the Treasury on how many government-funded or non-market jobs have contributed to the labour market in the last year?
So the number of government...
The government jobs or non-market jobs?
Well, not all government, are they, in the non-market?
Well, how do you break it down?
So non-market will include care economy, education, public administration.
Okay, so that's all under one bucket?
Under non-market, yes.
Okay, well, can you confirm how many government-funded jobs contributed to the labour market in the last year?
No, I don't think I can.
You don't collect that
That's why
information.
they're broken into market and non-market.
Okay, but wouldn't it be a useful breakdown?
For what? Like
Well, it's good to know how many jobs the taxpayer is propping up, and good to know how many jobs the market is propping up.
Well,
so
I think
non-market is government funded, is that right?
No, sorry, Adam Chiarini, First Assistant Secretary, Macro Conditions and Population Division. The ABS don't publish it on a funding basis. They'll do it as private and public jobs, and they'll also do a market, non-market split. But on those jobs in the non-market sector, they do not provide information around which of those jobs are funded by government.
So what's the definition of non-market then?
Non-market are three sectors in the economy, so it's in particular public administration, safety, education and training, as well as healthcare and social assistance.
So they're roles that are supported by government
They're
funding of some
predominantly
sort.
government.
Yes, we've got
yeah.
nods coming from the desk.
They're considered non-market because they're predominantly government.
They're reliant on government funding.
so. They're not good jobs. Is that
So
right?
the jobs
or-
wouldn't exist without government funding. Is that right?
Not all of them. So there are some, for instance, in some of this stuff, like in education, there'll be private help, there'll be private schools, employment in private schools in that, for example.
Okay. So how many government jobs have been created in the last year?
Government
across the country, across
Yeah, you
because
have
it's
those-
reporting employment across the country, as you'd understand.
So in terms of
1.2%.
in terms of public jobs, it's to the September quarter 2024. It's about 1.2% growth over the year.
And of a proportion of overall employment growth?
As a proportion, so private was 1.8% growth.
40% is public.
So about in terms of shares, about 40% is public.
40% is public?
Yep.
Okay, so 40% of the employment growth in the last year, you're saying is government-funded jobs?
40% represents the public, well, how the ABS defines public, yeah.
Which is separate from how you just define non-market?
That's right, yeah.
So to use your non-market definition, how big would that be?
Non-market would be 83%.
83%?
Yep.
So 83% of the employment growth in the last year, non-market jobs?
Yes.
Wowzers. Okay. Does that concern you?
So I think we've seen for a number of years there's shortages in the care economy and those related ones. So this is it looks like a recalibration that's coming through.
Okay, just to be clear, the definition of non-market is largely government supported.
Non-market includes education and training, healthcare, social assistance, as well as public administration and safety. So it'll be all those three.
Okay, so is it a true to label non-market? They're not market jobs, they exist because of public subsidisation?
Sorry, I missed that question. Sorry, Senator.
Sorry. So is it a true to label sticker in the sense that these roles wouldn't exist in the market without some sort of government substitution or subsidisation? That's why you call them non-market jobs. Is that right?
So they're certainly jobs that are supported by government provision, by government support. However, it would depend on the nature of those entities, the businesses, how they interact. So some non-market provision can still be coming through a non-supported position, like my colleague said before.
Okay. So sorry, was it 83%?
Last question.
Was it 83%? You said?
Yes, that's right.
So
That was the share of
83%
growth in
of new jobs and non-market jobs in Australia. Okay. How does that impact productivity?
So I think when we look at productivity in the non-market sector or the service sector is very difficult to estimate. So what we would tend to do is you can separate them out to look at market sector versus non-market sector. So if we just look at the market sector, productivity is higher. And then we've also got some other things that will drag on market sector productivity, such as the mining sector. So, but yeah, the non-market sector is very difficult to measure. I think we talked about that like the last Senate estimates.
Does it drive it down?
So it would pull down total productivity. Yes,
It would.
It would, just because it's the way it's measured, because there's measurement problems. I think I may have mentioned last time the Productivity Commission did do some analysis looking at the productivity. It's really hard to measure quality improvements and other things in the sector, in the non-market sector. So there are measurement challenges.
Thank you. I'll
Scary
share
numbers.
the call.
Why are they these are good, secure jobs for people across the community, in aged care, in hospitals, in early education and care. I mean, these are areas
What it's telling you is that the government is propping up the labour market. That's
so
what it tells you.
Are you suggesting that we shouldn't be
we want the private
subsidising early
economy to be
education
driving.
and
We want
care,
small business and the
or-
private economy to create
or the
jobs.
healthcare system?
Well, you hate
or
small
the
business, so you've
aged
killed
care?
small business and replaced it
Well,
with big
that's
government.
not true.
You hate small business, you always have, and you've replaced it with big government jobs.
When did you
I'm
run a small
not
business,
true.
Andrew?
80
Okay,
years
order.
you've got government jobs.
That is not true.
Order.
We have resourced the public
When did you last
sector.
BAS statement?
Order.
When did you put your last BAS statement in?
How many houses have you got?
Okay.
Daughter of an immigrant.
All right. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's 7.
Thank you. I think the Minister was seeking to conclude an answer in relation to your last block of questions. Have you concluded, Minister?
Well, I just want to make the point that the kind of disdain that the opposition is showing towards non-market employment is regrettable, because those jobs are good jobs. We need people in those jobs. When you're looking after your grandmother in aged care, you will want the right level of staffing in those centres so that your grandmother can get adequate care. So, I mean, there's a bit of snobbery, I think, towards the service sector and towards the care economy. But we, through our policies, have supported jobs in that sector because we know that people want to be cared for properly, whether it's a young child or an older Australian,
Would you prefer
or
private
someone
sector
who
growth, though?
needs... Well, excuse me, Senator Hume, you've
would
had
you
enough
prefer
time this morning. Or whether
Would it
it's
be better to
somebody
have
who
private
needs
sector
care
growth?
through the healthcare system.
But it'd be better for the economy to have private
and-
sector growth, wouldn't it?
Well, I'm not going to respond to Senator Hume's extremely
Interjections,
rude
yeah.
interjection.
It's an economic
she was
question,
out
at
of
least.
control
Senator
yesterday.
Hume.
She's been out of control all day today. But the point I'm making is that there is this disdain towards those jobs. They are good jobs, they are needed jobs, they needed to be paid properly, and this government has done exactly that. And we've created more market jobs as well, and you won't like this, Senator Bragg, more market jobs than any first-term government in recorded history. How does that sit with you?
Great. Well, I
not
mean,
very well,
small
I
business is
imagine, because
saying
it's not
okay.
really the
They're
narrative
collapsing.
you're
Well,
after, is
See
it? But
the
it's
insolvency
actually the
figures?
facts.
I'm going to share
How
the call
disappointed for you.
now, and I'm going to go to Senator O'Neill.
Thank you very much, Chair. And just to pick up the threads of where we were, I believe you now have all the documents that I've tabled. I want to clarify, because in some of these documents, Mr Godwin Gretsch, a figure well known in the public place with significant associations with the Liberal Party, he indicated in his emails that he was dealing with the bank guarantee business. I want to draw attention to the Senate Privileges Committee's indication that the bank guarantee business to which Mr Godwin Gretsch refers is the Australian Business Investment Partnership, just to put that on the record. The documents that you have in front of you are in fact documents with a Treasury address, mail to godwin.gretsch@treasury.gov.au, but they are highly personal in nature. And as I indicated with the attachment 4 that I've tabled, it starts, I very much hope you and your family are well. I've been very busy here dealing with this bank guarantee business and Rudd's unintended consequences. There's much to discuss. If you can have a look at the 5th attachment, Mr Godwin Gretsch, as a senior Treasury official, using his Treasury email, writes this: I trust that you and your family are doing well. I think of you often. I've been quite busy here. They roped me in to work on the bank guarantee debacle about a month ago. Anyway, I've certainly been doing my best to help out. I think you know what I mean. Does it constitute normal practice that a senior Treasury official using his Treasury email would be writing in such a tone, referring to Treasury as they, and writing incredibly personal emails indicating he's doing his best to help out if you know what I mean. Dr. Johnson, would you undertake that kind of practice?
No, I wouldn't, but I'm not sure what was going through Godwin's mind at the time, and yep.
So to be clear, your answer is no, you would not be using your Treasury address to write such personal emails to members of a political party from within Treasury. Is that correct, Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Sorry, Dr. Johnson. Dr. Johnson.
Shipley was Prime Minister, Mr. Barton.
Senator Hume.
Sorry, Mr.
I can see that this is a sore spot for others around the table, but I am pursuing this matter, a matter of probity,
Senator McGrath.
of interest to the Australian people, proudly as a senator for New South Wales, a Labor senator.
Senator Hume, cease your interjections. Senator O'Neill has the call.
Based on the
Senator
Treasury
O'Neill has the call.
submission to the Privileges Committee, this is how the documents that you have are characterised.
Can I raise a point of order, please?
Documents and emails recovered from Treasury.
Can I raise a point of order, please?
Senator O'Neill, Senator McGrath has a point of order which I hope is different from the multiple previous points of order on relevance. I hope it's a different point of order because I have already ruled on your previous points of order. Senator McGrath.
My understanding is that Senator O'Neill is referring to submissions to a privileges report.
Public documents.
They are public documents. They have been published.
Yes.
Thank you, Senator McGrath.
So my next point of order is it does go to relevance as to how events that happened back in 2009, which is 16 years ago, are possibly relevant to the budget estimates today. And the precedent that will be set, Chair, in that if these documents and this line of questioning is relevant, means that the bar has been lowered so much. But also, with respect, I might go back to Senator O'Neill's point, the report has been published, Senator O'Neill, but these submissions are not online. So I think we need to have a private meeting.
You could go to the
I think we need to have a private meeting.
Don't need a private meeting, you just go down to the library, you'll find them there. They're actually there available for you if you want to do some research.
I think we should call a private meeting to discuss this now, given that the Privileges Committee is supposed to be beyond the reach of these matters.
This is a public document. It's a public report.
These submissions are not
on public
available online.
documents. I want to continue with my line of questioning,
I think we should
Chair.
have a private meeting, Chair, to discuss this and get some proper advice.
You probably need to get some advice on this.
So in relation...
Otherwise it'll be your trouble.
Just in relation to the matter on relevance, I understand the concerns that the opposition has around the line of questioning, but the questions are relevant because they pertain to an area of policy development.
Well, Chair, relevance is irrelevant. A private meeting has been requested.
Don't.
You're ruling on something that probably should be discussed outside the door, and I'm trying to help you.
Senator Hume, I'll have to start again now and say that in relation to the question of relevance, which Senator McGrath did just raise, and so I should respond to that. The line of questioning is relevant because it pertains to an area of policy development that was undertaken by Treasury. And so I don't want that point of order to be repeatedly raised as it has been. And I think it would be disorderly to continue to raise the same point of evidence when I have ruled on it. In relation to the question that you've raised about the Privileges Committee and documents pertaining to the Privileges Committee, I will share with you that I don't have Senator O'Neill's questions. And so I will ask Senator O'Neill to respond to that point of order, because I can so that I can understand what it is that she's asking.
There's no need to do anything in private. It's all very public.
But it's been requested.
This document is available publicly, and so are the documents to which I'm referring. They are public documents. So I will continue with my questions if I have the full please.
Senator O'Neill. Senator,
this was an extraordinary cover-up trying to hide the behaviours of what they must fear has gone on with their leader.
What I understand.
That's the only explanation for this extraordinary behaviour.
Senator McGrath.
Out of control.
Senator McGrath.
I'm moving dissent in your...
That is now serious.
It is quite serious. I'm moving a motion of dissent in your failure to call a private meeting to discuss the use by Senator O'Neill in relation to these documents which have not been published online in relation to a possible abuse of the privileges process. A private meeting has been called for by two permanent members of the committee.
Privileges. I have chaired privileges, and I'm currently the deputy chair of privileges. This is a public document.
I was attempting to hear... can you let me speak? I was just attempting to hear from Senator O'Neill whether the documents that she is talking to are in fact public, which she has said that they are.
It doesn't matter because a private meeting's been called.
Okay. The committee will take a brief suspension for a private meeting. It resumes, and the committee reports that the committee has had a private meeting, and the committee agrees the following: that the questions being asked by Senator O'Neill are relevant to these Senate estimates. Senator O'Neill will be heard in silence as she concludes her line of questions. The document in relation to Mr Dutton's register of interests will not be received by the committee. Senator O'Neill.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just to pick up the pieces, I believe I was directing a question to you, Dr Johnson. Reflecting on an email or a series of emails from Mr Godwin Gretsch using a Treasury email, noting that he was a senior Treasury official. Mr Gretsch indicated that he was working on the Australian Business Investment Partnership, which he shorthands in the term the bank guarantee business. He states in one email dated the 3rd of December 2008, I have been very busy here dealing with this bank guarantee business and RUD's unintended consequences. There is much to discuss. In the second document, which I think you believe just before the committee broke to consider the relevance of the questioning, which is dated the 6th of November 2008, he writes again from the Treasury email, they roped me in to work on the bank guarantee debacle about a month ago. Anyway, I've certainly been doing my best to help out. I think you know what I mean. He also, in that 6th of November email from Treasury, says to an individual engaged in political discussions with him, as for me, I think T sees me being of more value when I am, brackets, albeit at considerable personal risk for me. We have never discussed the possibility of me making the move. These are political conversations, Dr Johnson, using the Treasury email. Would you behave in that way, and is that standard practice for Treasury officials?
So my understanding is the matters involving Mr Gretsch were investigated at the time. He no longer works for the department. I don't think he's worked for the department for many years now. I don't think I have any further comment on or anything else to add on it.
And we wish Mr Gretsch all the best in his life as he continues, but this is interrogating practices around the time that $4 billion was invested in the markets, a policy that is very significant for our response to the GFC. You indicated it was discussed at the time. The documents and emails, and I'm reading now from the Privileges report, documents and emails recovered from the Treasury IT systems indicate that Mr Gretsch was active during normal business hours in corresponding with third parties on issues of a political nature and outside of his core work responsibilities. Do the emails I've read into the record accord with that description of the Privileges Committee? The ones you have in front of you.
The emails?
Emails recovered from Treasury IT system.
Yeah, I mean, it's got a Treasury address, but yeah, on the top, so.
Are these normal sorts of emails, or are they political in nature?
Like I said, I think the matters involving Mr Gretsch were investigated at the time.
And this is the statement of the Privileges Committee. I'm asking you, do you agree with it? It said he was corresponding in business hours with third parties on issues of a political nature and outside of his core work responsibilities. Do these documents that I've tabled represent that kind of behaviour, Mr Johnson? Dr Johnson, sorry.
I mean, that's the finding of the Privileges Committee. I won't second guess them.
You don't dispute that. Okay, thank you very much. So the reality we have at this stage is, from the reports of the committee and the evidence that we have that I've tabled today, Liberal Party officials were very aware, through Mr Godwin Gretsch's emails, of the Rudd government's developments around stimulus packages. In fact, on the 18th of February, Mr Gretsch emailed Malcolm Turnbull's staffer and CC's in Mr Turnbull himself a series of suggested questions for Senate estimates about the Australian Business Investment Partnership, including answers from his knowledge. I believe you may have been provided a copy of that as well by the Secretary. I have multiple copies here. If you would like to get them to the officials, please, that would be great. And I've got them for your Chair and the Deputy Chair. So if you could have a look at those. And he addresses Paul, as promised and discussed, I have prepared some possible questions for Senate estimates on the car dealer SPV and the commercial property SPV. Is it common practice, Dr Johnson, and is it in accordance with APS principles that a senior Treasury official engaged in policy would be providing this sort of detailed question and answer to a member, to a political party?
Like I said, I think these matters have been investigated, and I don't think I've got any more to add to it.
Mr Johnson, I'm not asking you to agree with this document. You've already said that you agree with the findings of the Privileges Committee, which found private emails going on. My question is, if this kind of behaviour was happening today, if one of your Treasury officials created a document like Godwin Gretsch and was sending it to members of the opposition, would you sanction that behaviour, Dr Johnson? Is that in accordance with APS values?
I would need to look into all the circumstances. Like I said, I haven't seen the document itself, but that would be something that I would likely raise with the Secretary. You would raise it with the Secretary? You would consider it a serious matter? Like I said, I haven't seen the actual documents themselves, but from what
sorry,
you just...
I thought you have a copy of the questions in front of you.
No, sorry.
Can you have a look at those? I do need to get your response to that once you've seen it.
Yep.
We literally just made an agreement.
Okay. So these are questions prepared by Mr Godwin Gretsch, the Principal Advisor, Corporations and Financial Services Division, while he was working at Treasury, provided to the then opposition directly from him to Mr Paul Lindwall and CC to Mr Malcolm Turnbull. Is this the kind of behaviour that you would sanction amongst your Treasury officials working in Corporations and Financial Services Division, Dr Johnson?
Senator, I might introduce myself, Victoria Anderson, Deputy Secretary, Small Business, Housing, Corporate and Law Group. So issues around the behaviour of staff and the standards we're expected to adhere to as public servants would be managed in terms of Treasury's business by my group in the Corporate Division. So anything.
Have you got a copy of this?
I just received one. I haven't had a chance to consider it, Senator, but anything that went to matters of a political nature, I'm talking theoretically here, as has been said by Dr Johnson, these matters were investigated quite thoroughly at the time in relation to Mr Gretsch. So I'm not referring to him or to those circumstances at all, but if something like this was to occur again and we discovered it, that would be a matter of an investigation by the department into a code of conduct breach, most likely. Clearly behaving in a way that could be seen or actually was political and not impartial would be a breach of the code of conduct, and we would be required to investigate that. That would be done in the usual course of events, and a decision would be made on whether a breach has occurred, and then a sanction would be applied.
Thank you. And what sort of sanction would we be talking about for that?
It's very
sort of
much,
level of
there's a
breach?
delegate for each investigation, so it is actually up to the delegate to determine the sanction, so depending on the level of severity. I can't remember the exact range, but there can be anything from you're cleared, obviously, there can be a reprimand, and then obviously someone can be removed from their position if it was seen as a serious enough breach.
Great. So coming to the close of my questioning, Mr Gretsch, then, not now, we're talking about behaviours in that period of time, was, in common parlance, leaking like a sieve to the Liberal National Party opposition. He has declared in these documents from his Treasury address to members of the Liberal Party his knowledge and intimate involvement with policy design. He was engaged in multiple conversations with many people, to the point that when the IT system was investigated, Treasury indicated that he was corresponding with third parties on issues of political nature outside of his core work responsibilities while at work and using his Treasury resources. It's an extraordinary situation, that dissemination of information. Could I go to, given that context around market sensitive information, because this was profoundly market sensitive information, what are your practices around that now? Have you changed any processes from that period of time?
I wasn't in the department at that time, but I certainly can talk to what we would do now. So all senior executive employees and executive level 2 employees, and some employees below that level, so that's kind of middle management level, and senior executives are required to do at least an annual conflict of interest form to their manager where they declare any real or perceived conflicts of interest. Those forms are assessed by their manager, and if there is a management process needing to be put in place, it will be. So that might be, you know, if you have a business interest, the management could, for example, could be to not work on anything that related to that business, or if you had significant numbers of shares beyond the ordinary, and you may not want to work on something that related to the company in which you had shares. Those sorts of things are quite routinely declared and managed within that process. And then we also have...
What about if you were highly engaged in a political party and communicating with senior people, including ministers?
Yes, so that would definitely be required to be declared, although there are quite specific things that are allowable. Obviously, public servants are able to vote, and citizens, and participate in the political process like anyone else. However, how you express your political views and allegiances are constrained by being a public servant, and that's outlined in, I think, the Public Service Commission has a good document on a guide to the Code of Conduct and what your obligations would be in that regard. So it depends how active your political engagement is. Obviously, running for Parliament or those sorts of things are very obviously things that require you to step down, and then identifying yourself as a public servant and then expressing your political views is also problematic. So there's a range of things. But in the example you gave, I mean, sharing information that is confidential and effectively should be managed with the government, with anyone who is not the government, is not probably a breach of the Code of Conduct. It would go to confidentiality of government processes. There may be other things involved in those circumstances as well.
And we have no view, despite the report, of how far and wide Mr Godwin Gretsch shared his insights into this $4 billion policy investment.
I have no knowledge of that, Senator.
No one has any knowledge of how far it went. I think we've got the documents that I've tabled. So if I can ask a final question. If information of a market-sensitive kind without authorisation was used for private personal profit, such as to inform the purchase of shares in Australian major banks on the day before a bank bailout package was announced, what would be the consequences for that sort of an offence?
The consequences for the public servant involved, obviously we don't have jurisdiction over anyone who may receive it and do something with it necessarily.
That's up to their integrity to...
That is up to their integrity, whatever governs their behaviour, including a range of other things that apply to private citizens.
Principle over profit, it's a choice.
Correct,
right?
yes. But for the public servant involved, in a theoretical sense, that sort of thing would trigger the sort of investigation I referred to earlier, a code of conduct investigation that we would conduct quickly once we knew about the information.
Would you characterise it as a serious matter?
I would characterise that as a serious matter, yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair. Thanks.
Thank you, Senator O'Neill. I've got a number of senators who have questions. I'll go to Senator Bragg, then Senator Barbara Pocock.
Just ask you about some of the Centre for Population matters, please. I've also got some questions about the Barton government. The Barton government from 1901 to 1904.
Yep.
Can I ask those to you?
I'm not that familiar with the Barton
I'm only
government,
joking, don't worry.
Senator.
Let's talk about population. Now, is it true that over the next 6 years, just over the 6-year period from 2022-23 to 27-28, is it true that net overseas migration is expected to be in excess of 2 million people?
So, Senator, are you referring to the flow or the stock?
The overall net overseas migration.
So when we forecast net overseas migration, Senator, we usually refer to it as the flow. It's the number of people coming in and the number of people going out of the country.
Yeah, so the net figure. So is it true that the expectation is that there'll be 2 million people from 22-23 to 27-28?
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
that's correct.
Yeah.
So over 2 million. How much over 2 million?
Senator Nick Latimer, Assistant Secretary for the Centre for Population. My numbers here are 2,027,000.
What's the number?
2,027,000.
Okay. How does that compare to prior years?
So one of the things that's driving that is a rebound post-COVID. So it would, looking at prior years probably isn't an accurate comparison.
Right.
So, for example, in 22-23, we're getting a strong rebound due to not having migration during the COVID period.
But isn't it true that if you go back to prior budgets and the prior budget projections, that since this government was elected, that the projections have almost always been exceeded?
I think we've dealt with that in previous estimates with advice from Treasury.
Sorry, I didn't understand that answer.
Well, I think we have covered this issue in previous examination of budget estimates, including the fact that upward revision post-COVID was underestimated in the forecasts.
Am I right in saying that in the 22-23 budget back from March 2022-2023, the projection was that there was to be 180,000 people on a net basis, and it ended up being quite a lot higher?
So, Senator, I don't have the numbers from that budget to me at hand. I will comment that at the time borders had opened, and it was at that time predicting migrant behaviour, particularly arrivals, was quite difficult. And so the arrivals, there were some push and pull factors. Obviously, borders had opened. Yeah. There were other policies overseas, particularly countries like China, that told that students, if you want to study abroad, you need to go abroad. So there were some other push factors there, but understanding behaviours post-COVID and when borders opened up was actually a really difficult matter for the forecasters at the time to deal with.
And that's not just the Australian context as well, that's that's international. We saw the UK
Canada
as well, and
UK.
Canada, also those countries that have net migration.
But effectively, we're still looking at over 250,000 people coming in 25, 26, is that right?
That's the current forecast.
Yeah, 255 in 25, 26, yes.
That's right, isn't it?
Yep.
Okay. When did you finalise this population statement from 2024?
Senator, that was prepared over late last year and finalised in December.
Was it always intended to be released on the Friday before Christmas?
That was the date that we'd been planning for.
That was the
yes.
date?
Yep.
And have you done any modelling on the impact of having a large migration program, so 2 million people coming into the country over a few years, and how that's impacted housing?
Senator, that's not work that the Centre for Population has done, but I would clarify that's not a migration program. It also includes the flow of Australians and New Zealanders in and out of the country.
But you would accept, I imagine, that there is a connection between migration and housing. More people need more houses, right?
So short-term shocks can have an impact. So when there's a short-term change, because I think the Secretary's talked about this in the previous SEN estimates as well, about having short-term change. The housing market can't adjust as quick. So having certainty long-term is important. But yep.
So, Minister, I know you're interested in these things. Have you asked, or do you know whether the Treasurer, Mr Chalmers, has asked the Treasury to do some modelling on the connection between inbound migration levels going up and how that impacts Australian housing?
Well, clearly Treasury has been doing work on population and on migration, so you've got the report there, but also the work that's done in budgets and MyEFOs. It's important to say net overseas migration has fallen for 3 consecutive quarters in December 2023 and March and June 2024. And this is because some of the work that's been done into making sure we are addressing some of those pressures we're now seeing come through. And we're also focused on housing and increasing housing supply, and the Treasurer obviously has been very active in that space as well.
So is the answer to the question that you have commissioned analysis?
My answer to the question is that the Treasurer is fully across migration, net overseas migration and housing policy.
Okay, so what is the piece of work that exists in the Treasury that shows the impact of having 1 million people come into the country in the last 2 years and only building 160,000 houses? Where does that exist, that analysis? Who's got that? You've got it here today?
No, we don't have that analysis.
Does it exist?
We haven't done that. We haven't undertaken that analysis.
Oh, well, that's bad, isn't it?
No.
Don't you think that's bad, Minister?
No. I think
most people would look at it and say, well, the amount of people you have in the country impacts how many houses you need.
I think the people of Australia want a government that's focused on increasing the supply of housing, which we are doing, and taking responsible steps to ensure that our migration numbers are managed appropriately, and we are doing both of those things.
Well, I think sadly you and I both know that's not the case.
Yes, no, I don't accept that view from you.
Well, you're not building as many houses as the last government.
You, as a government, did not build any houses. That what you use there is the number of housing under construction. What we are doing,
you know, builders.
What we are doing is actively supporting the development of housing, which we are, and in homelessness, in social, in affordable. With working with the states and territories, we're pulling every single lever we have available to us to deliver more housing in this country, and the only policy you have is to cut it. And so don't sit in here and complain about lack of housing when your only policy is to abolish the Housing Australia Future Fund.
We have lots of policies.
Which is actually the policy that's ramping up investment in housing in this country.
How many houses does there have?
Well, we can go through that at the relevant section. Don't worry, we're all prepared for you,
Sounds
Senator Bragg.
Sounds like obfuscation to me, but anyway.
No, not at all. We've got a special set of numbers for you.
Fantastic.
Thank you, Minister. We'll go to Senator Barbara Pocock.
Thanks, Chair. My questions relate to the Future Made in Australia program. Future Made in Australia bill states the Treasurer will ask the Treasury Secretary to investigate a sector's potential. But in practice, there will be preliminary work done by Treasury to create a short list or narrow down good sectors to investigate. Has that work commenced?
Mahita Zahid, First Assistant Secretary, National Interest Framework Division in Treasury. So, Senator, since we've been funded and we've been established as a team within Treasury and the legislation passed Parliament, we have been doing work across the APS. There's a number of agencies who work in these sectors of the economy, Department of Industry, for example, Department of Climate Change, Energy and Water. So we have been working with our colleagues and peers to look at different sectors of the economy, get our team up to speed on how we would do a sector assessment if one was commissioned by government. And we've been looking at emerging sectors. We've engaged with lots of stakeholders who have raised issues with us, who have raised ideas. So we've been doing that general groundwork, as you would expect, to understand the economy, different sectors of the economy, monitor international developments and have that scan. I wouldn't say we've done kind of formal pieces in that space, but it's been very much more about coming up to speed, understanding the dynamics of different segments of the economy.
So you're clearly working with very deep experience in a range of departments where there has been a lot of thinking about where our industry future strengths lie. Can we get a sense of the possible sectors that you're looking at?
So, Senator, the legislation purposefully doesn't define a sector, so there, in some sense, is a continuum when we think about the sector assessment process. So areas we've looked at, so the priority sectors that's been announced obviously has been hydrogen, green metals, there is clean energy manufacturing and critical minerals processing within the economic resilience and security stream, and low carbon future fuels. So there are always processes and supply chains adjacent to those sectors. So we've been obviously looking at that. So when you think about hydrogen supply chain, you look down the pipeline of that. Clean energy manufacturing is a really broad sector. So government's made announcements in relation to solar, but there are other components within the clean energy manufacturing space. And then from economic resilience and security perspective, there's been work done through primarily the Department of Industry. They have the OSCO function, the Supply Chain Resilience function, who's looked at different components. So we've been engaging, as you've said, there's a lot of expertise sitting within the APS across sectors of the economy. So we've been engaging across agencies to better understand what they've done, what are areas of priority that could come up, but we haven't done in some senses, we haven't got our short list of sectors that we are talking to government about in a formal way.
Given the recent announcements around Whyalla, will a green steel sector assessment be done?
So, Senator, as part of the previous budget, green metals was identified as a sector that's aligned to the National Interest Framework. So, given the opportunity that Australia has with the resources that we've got in the ground, plus the potential for renewable energy at cheap prices. So green metals, which includes steel, aluminium, iron, was identified as a priority sector as part of that budget process.
So that's a yes, I think.
So it didn't go through, I'm kind of splitting hairs here a little bit. The sector assessment process was legislated in December, so it hasn't gone through that Treasurer-commissioned sector assessment process under the FMIA Act, because it didn't exist at the time. But the National Interest Framework was formed. In some senses, it's an articulation of the work that was done in the lead-up to that budget. So did we look at the types of things that are in the National Interest Framework in the legislation? Absolutely. And there's a budget supporting paper that outlines our analysis of the green metals sector that was released by Treasury just after, I think it might have even been on budget night, so in the previous budget.
Have you been engaged in discussion about how investments at Whyalla might proceed?
So, Senator, in the ordinary way that Treasury is involved in cabinet processes, yes, Treasury has been very closely linked. That work's led out of our DISA, so Department of Industry, Science and Resources, so they are the lead agency. But Treasury, in the ordinary course of how we engage on cabinet processes, have been very closely engaged.
So regarding the commitment specifically to build an electric arc furnace at the site, will that be done through Export Finance Australia's national account or through some other financial vehicle? So,
Senator, I think these questions are probably better directed at DISA, who are appearing after us, so you've still got that good run. I can outline the large components of the package, and I think the finance hearings yesterday took you through it, so it's a question about whether you want me to. It'll be the same information. We've got the same briefing notes. But in some senses, what's been announced has been certain packages. There is a package which has yet to be landed. The final shape of that will depend on negotiations with the administrator, so that piece is not yet settled, and the format that takes will really very much depend on the work that the administrators do and the negotiations with South Australia, so that's the piece that I can't comment on. But the $500 million in the Green Iron Fund, that is being administered by DISA, so that is a separate piece.
Okay. And you listened to the evidence yesterday in finance. Do you have anything you want to add to what was said about the various buckets of funding, their potential for a purchase of equity within any rescue involved in the $1.9 billion and so on? Anything you want to say about that?
No, Senator, I think my colleagues at Finance did an excellent job and I wouldn't have anything new information to add.
Okay. I'll come back to DISA then about some of that detail. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. And I understand that Senator Rennick had a couple of for macro international foreign investment.
Yes,
Senator
that's
Rennick.
Cheers. Thanks, Chair. Hey guys, how you going? Can I just clarify the rules around foreign ownership of housing? And I'd just like to reference an article on the web that, it's just on the Daily Mail talking about, I'll just quote it for you. Chinese home buyers have made a strong return to the Australian housing market, driven in part by the weaker dollar and the Chinese New Year holiday period. XXX of this agency, which specialises in selling homes to Chinese buyers, said it had already seen a 20% increase in inquiries for viewing properties during the Chinese New Year. My understanding of it was that foreigners can only buy new property, not existing property. And question one. And question two is, can the parents of students studying here buy property here?
Senator, in answer to your first question, there's recently been an announcement of a ban on purchase of established dwellings. So until recently, there were certain circumstances under which people could buy established dwellings, but that will change effective 1 April.
Right, okay.
For a ban. And I'm happy to go through the exceptions that there were, but basically...
Yeah, what were the exceptions, if you don't mind?
Yeah, so either it involves a primary residence in Australia or the purchase of a property by an employer on behalf of an employee.
Right, okay.
Or where there is substantial redevelopment that adds to the housing stock.
Yeah, okay. So in the case of a foreign student, if they were studying here and they wanted a house to live in, you could have bought a house for the students studying here.
They would have to buy it.
Yeah, they'd have to buy it while they were here and then sell when they left.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. That's good to know. Okay, so I just wanted to clear that up. Now, the other thing I've addressed in the past is in terms of money laundering, and I've spoken about how real estate agents don't have to lodge to the tax office when they either pay rent offshore. Now, I know the tax office is now asking for people to declare your citizenship before you sell. But have you ever thought about the same with stockbrokers? Because I note that the Tax Act exempts foreign investors who own less than 10% of a stock from paying capital gains. I note that there's no stamp duty on buying and selling shares, unlike Australians who buy real property, for example. That is a market ripe for money laundering, and I note that actually the head of ATSIC came out today in the Australian, Joe Longo, and said he's worried about dark pools of money, which I'm glad that he's raised that really good issue, but I'll raise that with him later. Are you concerned about the risk of money laundering through stockbrokers as well, I guess? Because I can see that there's a big gap there in terms of money laundering.
Yeah, so we're responsible for the foreign investment framework, so that sort of doesn't come into our territory, but I think...
Well, can I just...
Yep.
So yep. I'd argue there's a risk there, though. It could, because foreign investors come in and buy shares and then take the money out again, like they wash the money through.
Yeah, so purchase of shares wouldn't come through our framework.
Right.
We're the regulator of ownership.
Okay.
So yeah, the type of issue you've raised wouldn't be governed through the foreign investment framework.
Okay, right. And last question, thanks, Chair. So we've, I know Westpac last week have now off-sourced another 160 jobs out to the Philippines. I know we've recently signed a free trade agreement with India. Do we know how much money in remittances is getting sent offshore in terms of wages paid either for outsourcing or people coming onshore? So, for example, I've been told that there's people coming from the Philippines to build the transmission lines between Wagga and South Australia. Is that something that Treasury tracks in terms of how much in remittances is going offshore into each country? And how much, and if so, how much withholding tax is being withheld on those payments?
Do you know, Shane? We might need to take that one on notice, Senator.
Okay, so you're not sure if you do that? Okay, no worries. I'll just... okay, well, look, I've got time for one more?
Yep.
Okay. The other question I asked about, and I'll raise this to the tax office as well, but I think it could touch Treasury as well. We've raised the issue last time of the tax treaty with Ireland hadn't been updated since 1983, and then there has been some tightening of those provisions in 2019 with the cracking down on multinational tax evasion. I note, however, that the withholding tax on royalties and interest paid to Ireland is still at 10 cents in the dollar. Is that going to go to 15 cents in the dollar once these new agreements are brought in 2026?
Hector Thompson, the Deputy Commissioner, International Support and Programs at the ATO. Probably a question for the session later today.
Yeah, sure.
And it would be covered under the treaty renegotiation program, which my colleagues in the Corporate International Tax Division of Treasury would be able to speak to.
Yes, I'll raise that with the ATO later tonight.
Well, it's the treaty negotiation is a function that sits in the Treasury.
So it'd be with Revenue Group. You'd talk to
Revenue Group?
Yes.
Okay, cheers, thanks. Okay, thanks, Chair.
Senator Smith.
Just Mr Tinning, how are off-take agreements considered under our foreign investment review mechanisms?
Yeah, in general, off-take agreements are not part of our framework. We do...
They're not part of the mandatory framework, are they?
No. Mm-hmm. But where an off-take agreement is used as sort of a basis for a binding contract, that can sometimes come into our framework, but in general, it's outside our framework.
Is it the fact that it's outside the framework, is that under active review or watch?
We're always looking at our settings and where there might be scope for improvements in our legislation, so that's certainly an issue that's been raised with us and something we're thinking about.
Who has raised it with the Treasury? Who has raised it with the Treasury? Individual proponents or industry associations, or?
Oh, it's partly through stakeholder feedback, partly through just our experience in administering the Act and the fact that off-take agreements sometimes may be used in ways that exert influence over companies but are not currently captured in our Act.
They are becoming a more significant part of the bankability of a project. That is true, isn't it?
I think it very much depends on the sector, but in certain sectors, off-take agreements become very important components.
Which sectors are they?
Oh, particularly in the mining sector.
Mm-hmm. So was the matter of off-take agreements considered as part of the 1 May 2024 reforms, or has the issue emerged since those matters were considered?
The reforms in May were policy reforms, including offtake in the foreign investment framework would require legislative reform.
Right. And so just in summary, that matter, so offtake arrangements are under active review from a policy and legislative perspective?
Well, it's one of the issues that is on our radar in considering potential future legislative reform.
All right, great, thank you. I just want to go back to the Future Made in Australia policy. So just in regards to your evidence to Senator Pocock, is it a correct statement that no new policy announcements in the last 6 months under the Future Made in Australia umbrella have had independent sector assessments undertaken?
So, Senator, the policies that have been announced in the previous 6 months follow on from the assessments that were done in the budget context, in the 24-25 budget context. So they have had the assessment done, and obviously it takes some time to develop those policies, and the timing of announcement of government's policies are a matter for government. But the announcements in relation to the Green Iron Fund, the Green Aluminium Fund, the legislation of the production tax incentives for hydrogen and critical minerals processing, the announcement in relation to kind of first allocation of the Innovation Fund, all of those reflect the work and the analysis that was done by Treasury and others in the APS, and were formed part of the paper that I referenced previously. So it's a continuation of the earlier assessment, or the culmination of policy responses to the earlier assessment.
So, but they've not been concluded, or they have been concluded?
The assessment work, so for example, maybe green metals is the easiest one to go to, Senator. So we looked at what it would be the basis of Australia's sustained comparative advantage in a sector such as green metals, with us having the mineral resources, with us having the potential for cheap renewable energy. It's a sector we identified could be a source of long-term sustained comparative advantage in a net zero economy. That analysis was done. The policy announcements and the development of the policy that's followed is, in some senses, how you expect those processes to go forward. The sector assessment process is really about helping government, providing advice to government on what those fundamentals are, and then it is for line agencies like DISA and others to develop those policies, and then government obviously makes those announcements.
So if I put my question a different way, which projects or initiatives have independent sector assessments been completed for?
So, Senator, the sector assessment process doesn't look at specific projects. It's not designed to look at specific projects. It's designed to look at a sector in aggregate. So, for example, with hydrogen, the work that was done by Treasury, led by Treasury, looked at the potential for hydrogen in the Australian economy, what the comparative advantage Australia could have in that. Then the Hydrogen Head Start program, which is being developed and implemented by DQ, and then the Hydrogen Production Tax Incentive, which is obviously broad-based. DQ, in the context of Hydrogen Head Start, will assess individual projects that come in under that project. They will provide advice to government. They will operate that program. Similarly, with the Green Iron Fund and the Green Aluminium Fund, obviously with the Green Iron Fund, 500 million has been set aside for YLR, up to 500 million. DISA will run a process to provide advice and implement the grants. So Treasury's not, the sector assessment process is not intended to look at specific individual projects, but the sector in aggregate.
So which sectors in aggregate have had their sector assessments completed?
Yep. So as I referenced previously, as part of 24, the previous budget. I get my budget years a bit confused, but the budget that happened in last May, there were 5 sectors that were identified, and work was done in relation to those. They are green metals, hydrogen, low carbon future fuels under the net zero segment of the sector assessment process, and then there was critical minerals processing and clean energy manufacturing under the economic resilience and security stream. As I said previously, that analysis and that work predates the legislation having gone through Parliament. The legislation only went through Parliament in December, so have we done a formal sector assessment under the new legislated framework? No, Senator, we haven't.
And is that because you had to wait for the legislation to pass before you could do that task?
So the legislation does a number of things. Largely it
Does it prohibit you from working on or completing those sector assessments?
No, the legislation doesn't. Treasury provides analysis on a number of issues. We provide advice to government on a number of issues. The sector assessment process as legislated creates legislative architecture. It creates obligations on the government to then table that report and have it made public. It also sets out some specific things that Treasury must look at in part of those assessments. We have not been asked subsequent to that legislation passing to do another sector assessment, but if one was tasked to Treasury, we would be well positioned to undertake that.
So have those aggregate sector assessments been completed for each of those 5 areas that you mentioned?
So the analysis it's a bit splitting hairs, right? So let's take sector assessments without the capital S and the capital A, i.e. under the legislative framework. But the analysis was done, and the budget paper, the Treasury information paper that we put out, sets out a lot of the foundations of that analysis. So that was made public.
But it's not, the Treasury paper is not the analysis, it's the foundations for
it. Sets out the analysis. Yeah. Okay. I don't have a copy actually on me, but it's on our website. I'm happy to kind of provide a copy to the Secretariat if that's useful, but it sets out some of the, for example, for hydrogen, what some of the cost curves could look like. So it does set out the basis of our analysis for those 5 sectors.
Senator Smith, I think we'd like to move to the next program, which is small business, housing, corporate and law. Are you in a position to move to the next program?
That's my ambition as well, but in a few moments, yeah.
So how long do you need?
Well, the officials have been very cooperative with their.
I think we're keen to call the next program, but how long do you need?
Perhaps up to 10 minutes. I may take less than that.
Right. Okay.
So just to confirm, the aluminium production credits, they're not a tax credit, are they?
No, Senator.
And just explain that more fully.
I'll do my best, but the program is being run out of DISA, who will be able to give you the more detailed version. So tax credit...
DISA officials are not as cooperative as Treasury ones, I might add.
Senator, we have a very good relationship with my DISA colleagues. So the production credits, so a production tax credit versus a production credit, they operate in some senses, they've got similar economic fundamentals. It is an amount you get to support production. The tax credit obviously operates through tax legislation and it operates through our tax system. The aluminium production credit will be administered as outside of the tax system, but would be administered by DISA, and DISA will be looking to consult on the design of that proposal and the administration of that, but it will not be done through the tax system similar to the the 2 that has already been legislated. The detailed program design has commenced by my colleagues at DISA, as I understand it, with Business Grants Hub. So they will be really well positioned to give you more details about where that specific process is up to. But if there's a specific kind of question you've got about the difference, I'm happy to try and help.
That is fine. The community benefits principles have been a matter of much discussion. Where is the consultation up to around the community benefits principles? And are you able to share with the committee what is the current time frame for those consultations and the finalisation of those community benefit principles?
Yes, Senator. So Treasury is currently leading the work on the community benefit principle consultations. We have been preparing the materials for that consultation to provide to government, and the timing for obviously any consultation will be a matter for government. At this point in time, my team has worked again across the APS system. There are a number of these obligations or similar obligations that exist. So one thing we've been very keen to do, and we've heard a lot of stakeholder feedback, is to ensure that the obligations are implemented in a way that's efficient, that achieves the intent of the policy without undue regulatory cost. So we've been doing work across the...
And by regulatory cost, you mean duplication?
Duplication. Sometimes you can end up in very similar things with the same intent using slightly different language. So there's a lot of confusion caused by things like that. So we've been doing the work with agencies across the APS who administer different parts of existing obligations to develop a set of proposals which we will engage with government on, to then have that consultation that's been committed to. The timing for that, Senator, will be a matter for government.
When do you expect to have advice to government?
So we've been, advice is a continuum, as you all know. So we've been engaged.
But what we're talking about here, to be fair, though, is your first, your provision to government of the first piece of advice.
So we've provided
around
advice.
The CBP.
So we've provided advice to government all the way through.
But this is around the consultation process.
Around the consultation. So,
and it sounds to me like you're working on the consultation paper or the documentation that might actually support the consultation process.
So we would hope to have that to government in the near future. We haven't yet been in a position to provide that to the government, but we are working on that actively, and we hope to do that in the near future.
So I've learned through estimates that there's imminent, near, soon, as soon as practicable.
So I think we're in somewhere between the imminent and in the near future.
Does the government expect to have this information before the calling of the election?
Senator, that's a matter for government.
When is the election?
So 5th of April or the 12th of April. So the consultation process, is there a sense in terms of how long that will go for?
Senator, those are matters for government. What the government has committed to is a genuine and detailed and robust consultation on this. So I would expect that the standard Treasury consultation process tends to be about 4 weeks, but consultation can range from shorter periods, longer periods. So the intention would be to consult, and the timeframes for that would be decisions of government.
From the Treasury's perspective, is there an expectation about when these community benefit principles will be completed and operative?
So in terms of the operative nature of the community benefit principles, there are a number of programs. So there are 2 programs prescribed in legislation to which the community benefit principles attach. So they are the Innovation Fund and the EFA's Domestic National Interest Account. Currently, decisions in relation to EFA are made by government, and the ARENA Innovation Fund is operated by ARENA. Those principles are already in play. They're legislated, so ARENA can have regard. The legislation requires ARENA to have regard for those community benefit principles. ARENA, in the consultation they've done on solar sunshots, have already incorporated those community benefit principles into their consideration. So to your question around when are the principles operative, they're operative now, they're legislated now. The principles will also apply to the production tax incentive legislation for both hydrogen and critical minerals. The nature of that, so we still need to consult and develop those proposals. Those production tax incentives do not come into effect for another I'm going to get this wrong, but a couple of years. So it will be operative at that point when that legislation comes into play. But in some senses, Senator, the principles are clear. They're set out in legislation, and decision makers can and should be having regard to this. Actually, they must be having regard to that as they operationalise. The consultation will be to provide further clarity and direction, but they are currently operational.
Right, okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Great. Thank you very much, Senator Smith. Thank you very much to the Macroeconomic and International and Foreign Investment Group for answering our questions. That concludes the questions we have for you, and you go with our thanks. Thank you very much. The committee welcomes representatives from the Treasury, Small Business, Housing, Corporate and Law Group, and will take a brief suspension while you come to the table. The committee resumes and we welcome representatives from Treasury, Small Business, Housing, Corporate and Law Group. Thank you very much for being here and answering our questions. We are due to go to lunch, which we will do at 2:10 p.m. Senator Bragg.
How are you going? How are you going with the housing supply targets?
Senator Victoria Anderson, Deputy Secretary of Small Business, Housing, Corporate and Law Group. Just have to remember my title there for a minute. Senator, as you know, the target is 1.2 million homes that has been signed on to by National Cabinet. I think 28, 29 is the target, so we're 6 months in. Since the agreement, I think there are a range of things that state and territory governments have undertaken to do around planning and zoning systems, infrastructure, provision, various other things, and obviously the Commonwealth's got a significant suite of investments to support that as well.
What's the number for this year target?
There is no year-by-year target. It's a 1.2 million target, Senator.
But wouldn't you need 250,000 houses a year to meet the target?
We don't anticipate it being apportioned evenly over those years. There's going to need to be
not linear.
Well, it takes 2 to 3 years, most likely, to build houses, Senator. So we're starting to see all of the quite a few positive signs in the market.
So how many houses do we get this year?
Are you talking about government-supported houses or market houses, Senator?
How many houses were built in Australia in the last 12 months?
I'm going to pass to my team to talk through those numbers. I think we have the most recent quarterly data.
Karen Crossthwaite, First Assistant Secretary, Housing Division. So for the first quarter of the National Housing Accord target, which was the September quarter, which is the only data that we have available, that number was 43,247 homes, I believe. My colleague may correct me if he wants to come to the table. Mr Dowie, thanks.
Nicholas Dowie, the Assistant Secretary from the Housing Strategy Branch. So on a seasonally adjusted basis for the first 3 months of the National Housing Accord period, there were 44,884 homes were built.
Okay, so how many houses were built in Australia last year, did you say?
It was 177,000 and something.
177,000 houses?
Yes.
Okay. And we need to get 240,000 houses a year. So we're well short.
As Ms Anderson has said, the intent is not that the Accord targets would be apportioned
sure.
in that way.
But are we hitting the target or not?
we won't know until we're hitting the target until the end of the accord period.
Do you think we're on track?
We're doing everything we can to reach that target.
Well, are we on track?
We have a target and we are underpinning that target with a range of policies that will allow us to meet that target.
Okay.
Senator Bragg?
Well, let's just go to some numbers then, because I don't think we are on track, and I think you know that, which is why you're not giving a very clear answer.
I am giving a clear answer.
Well, are we on track or not?
We're on track for our target.
We're on track.
Yep.
So we're going to get 240,000 houses this year.
Well, you're trying to twist words and put them into my mouth.
No, I'm not.
You've already had evidence that the target is not an annualised target. And our policies, the reason we're working with the states and territories who have signed up to this, Senator Bragg, is that is what we would like to reach at the end of the accord period, and that we have policies that underpin that target.
In 5 years.
That is the target.
And you won't give any consideration as to whether you're on track during the interceding period?
Well, we are building more housing.
But
Senator Bragg, housing that you want to abolish.
But that's not right.
Yes, it is right.
Okay, so
let's go through some numbers.
Let's go through the numbers. So the average housing construction completions under the last government was 190,000. Under this government, it's 170,000.
How many was the government? How many was your government doing? How many was your government doing?
190,000.
No.
On average.
No, that is not correct. Your government, when you were in power, was not supporting the development of housing through the programs.
Two different things.
Oh, Senator Bragg.
You're talking about...
You are saying your government built 190,000.
Okay. So let me ask the official to try and get to the bottom of this. So when you talk about housing targets, you're talking about the housing targets that the government's building or the overall housing completions in the country?
Senator, the accord target was overall completions for the country.
Minister, did you hear that official say that? That was very helpful.
And Senator, I might add, the Commonwealth obviously has a role to play in that, but is not solely responsible for delivering the target.
We're heading in the wrong direction because we're building fewer houses than we had under the last government.
That's not true. It's not
190,000 under the last government, 170,000
Okay, well, let's look at the March quarter 2022. 37,000 homes were built. September quarter 2024, 46,000 homes were built.
I can tell you. The averages are there.
Yeah, we can all sit here and talk about it, but the facts are there.
Okay. Well,
I know you've got a particular narrative that you want to get out.
But you're trending in the wrong direction. I'm wondering how are you going to get us going in the right direction on housing? How are you going to fix it?
Well, by not abolishing the Housing Australia Future Fund, which is your policy at the moment. That is your housing policy at the moment, is to abolish the Housing Australia Future Fund.
Do you think the government can solve this problem without builders and developers and tradies?
We're working in partnership with everybody.
Well, you're not.
Across the board. Yes, we are.
Now, I'll move on.
You didn't even have a housing minister for most of the last decade.
We built more houses than you.
No, you didn't. You did
the numbers
not
don't
build.
lie.
This is one of those.
I did not see Mr Morrison or Mr Sukar out building houses or indeed even investing in houses.
Okay.
Ms Anderson just made the point the government can't solve this problem.
Shots potentially,
Senator Bragg.
but actually nothing where the Commonwealth invested.
Okay, well let's go to the next.
Senator Bragg, can we just for the several minutes remaining before lunch have one of those moments in the committee where somebody asks a question and then stops talking while the other person answers the question. So what's your question?
Trying to be very courteous here.
Yes.
And stick to the numbers. So let me ask you then about one of the policies you do have, which is designed to promote the private economy to build houses, because as we've heard in the evidence today, there's two types of houses that can be built in Australia. There are the houses built by the builders and the developers and the market, and then there are the houses that are built by the government through your Housing Australia Future Fund, which you think is terrific.
And other programs.
Other people might have different views, but those are the two.
Well, you're going to abolish it. So.
That's right.
All right.
So those are the two types of houses. So one of the policies I believe that you have is called the Housing Support Program. Is that right?
Senator, yes, that's one of the government's programs. It's administered out of the Department of Infrastructure.
And you've got 1.5 billion in that, have you?
I might ask Mr Dowry. Do you want to
See, these are good questions and answers. Back on track.
Yes, there was 1.5 million to the housing support.
1.5 billion?
1.5 billion, that's correct, yes.
Yeah, okay. How much of that's been spent?
That would be a matter for the Department of Infrastructure to answer that question because they administer the spending under that.
Who decides?
Who decides how?
Who decides who gets the money?
Oh, that's once again, that's a question for the Department of Infrastructure.
You don't know?
Who administered those funds? Well, the Department of Infrastructure administered those programs, and I believe that under that particular scheme, that Minister King is the decision maker. But once again, that's an issue for the Department of Infrastructure, who could accurately advise on those administrative features of that program.
But aren't you the Housing Department in Treasury?
We are we are part of the Housing Division in Treasury, but that particular program is administered by another department.
Okay, but wouldn't it be the case that if this is designed to help get houses built, that you would know about how the money's being spent and who's applying and
the
how it's
accountable
working?
authority is the Department of Infrastructure. So Treasury are not here to answer on their behalf.
But they're housing. The housing
There are
division.
housing functions in Treasury, and then there are programs run in infrastructure.
In another bureaucracy, because everything's a bureaucracy in your world.
This is the money bit, and then you talk to the builders about building bit.
Well, it's not. It's not going too well, is it?
Senator Bragg, the official is entitled to say which questions are within his purview to answer and which belong elsewhere, and that is all that has happened.
Does anyone know how much this money's been spent? Does anyone know how much of the 1.5 billion that was proposed to support infrastructure for housing has been spent?
Yes, Senator. The Department of Infrastructure officials will.
They know the information. Okay. Well, let's talk about your fantastic HAF then. Why don't you tell us, because when we asked, I think I asked the question in the Senate 2 weeks ago to Minister Wong, how many houses had the HAF built, and her answer was that it was on a duck. Now, apparently, according to the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age today, the Housing Australia Future Fund has now built 300 houses. So after 18 months and $10 billion, the HAF has now magically built 300 houses in the last 2 weeks since we were last here in the bush capital. So,
well, that's heavily editorialised.
It's not editorialised, it's just the facts.
There, Senator Bragg.
So what's happened? Tell me. We're desperate to know.
Well, yes, you've got a lot of interest for a fund that you want to abolish, so it's interesting.
You've briefed out to the paper today that it's built 300 houses that it hadn't built 2 weeks ago.
All right. Well, I don't think that's a fair assessment. Okay, let's go. Housing Australia has agreed on the first 13,700 social and affordable homes to be built through the Housing Australia Future Fund after it passed the Parliament after being delayed by you for at least 18 months, I think. The government has released a list of the successful projects under HAF Round 1. 340 homes are complete, and as these have been acquired and converted into social and affordable housing, and there are another thousands of others underway. So, is there anything more specific you would like?
Thank you for that answer. So the answer is 340 houses, is it?
Under the HAF, Senator, and obviously we would, Housing Australia will be appearing later, so they will have the most up-to-date information and are holders of sort of the data on where things are up to in terms of contractual close on HAF projects.
Okay, so it's built 340 houses as at what date?
I'll see if we can get you that. My advice is these are completed HAF homes that have been acquired.
They've been acquired, but were they acquired 2 weeks ago when Minister Wong gave a different answer?
Well, I don't think she did give a different answer.
I can read you the answer to. I can read the answer to if you want.
I think from memory, she was talking about the number that had been announced as part of Round 1. So she was talking about a pipeline from memory, and then you were all interjecting and shouting back at her, as is
very often,
as is your want in the chamber.
We're doing it right now.
So I don't believe that those answers are inconsistent.
Okay. So did you just say acquired and converted?
Yes, that's my understanding.
What does that mean?
Well, yeah, no, you go.
I was just going to pass to my team on that one.
So, Senator, the way that the HAF funding has been the program has been designed, there are certainly opportunities that CHPs will take up if they're able to acquire housing in developments that are already underway or already built. It's a way of them being able to have tenants in social and affordable homes as quickly as possible. It's not an unusual way for social and affordable housing to be provided by community housing providers.
So these houses were acquired?
Some of them.
Yeah. So
how many of them were actually built?
The figure that you're referring to there.
They've all been built.
Oh, so 340 you said were acquired. Were they acquired or were they built? It's a different thing.
Well, they all had to be built to be acquired.
I know that, but did the Housing Australia Future Fund build them or acquire them?
Well, the Housing Australia Future Fund doesn't build, it supports projects.
We know that.
Yeah, well, I'm answering your question. You said, did the Housing Australia Future Fund build them?
How many
and
has it
I am
built?
answering they are projects that have been supported through the Housing Australia Future Fund.
Okay, how many?
Okay,
how many
and I can take you through. We've got...
How many of the 340 were built and how many were acquired?
Well, we'll see if we can provide you with that answer. But if I can go through, there's 10,000 homes have been built due to government policy since May 2022. This includes 10,000 from the Home Guarantee Scheme.
That's a different program.
400 from the... well, we have a range of programs, many of whom you are opposed to.
We're talking about the HAF. You know
400... Well, I'm trying to give you some numbers. You said you wanted numbers. 400,
not about the Home Guarantee Scheme.
400 from the Social Housing Accelerator, 190 from the Affordable Housing Bond Aggregator, 180 from the National Housing Infrastructure Facility, 24,000 homes have been funded and are in planning or construction phase. This includes the 13,000 plus from the Housing Australia Future Fund, 4,000 from the Affordable Housing Bond Aggregator, 2,300 from the National Housing Infrastructure Facility, and 1,400 from the Social Housing Accelerator.
Okay, but...
So that gives you a sense of all of the work that is underway.
Okay.
Thank you. The committee will now break for lunch and